Mr. and Mrs. Watanabe, I have some bad news and some good news. The bad news is your son Takashi was killed 2 days ago at Nulxura 5. The good news is I have him right here. Okay, now, who can tell me what I did wrong? I'm Lewis Prescott. By rank, I am a lieutenant. By occupation, I am a mental health counselor, and my current assignment is with the Starfleet Casualty Affairs Office, where I am one of the Casualty Assistance Calls officers for Sector 301. Casualty assistance is one of the most important duties in Starfleet. Whenever a member of Starfleet is injured or killed or lost in the line of duty, it then becomes our duty to inform the next of kin of what has happened as soon as possible and in as respectful and sensitive a manner as possible. Because service in Starfleet carries with it the increased potential for a particularly gruesome or bizarre death, performing that duty can be a challenge. For the past few years, in addition to serving as a casualty assistance officer, I've also been a trainer. I have a background in mental health, but that's not a requirement for this assignment. Casualty Affairs is open to Starfleet personnel, commissioned and enlisted from all divisions and all departments. And whenever we have new people rotate in, I run a training class just to give everyone the basic tools that they're going to need. Which department is the worst at casualty assistance? Oh, it wouldn't be fair to generalize like that. Engineers. Because they tend to have bad people skills. They're not intentionally insensitive or disrespectful. Quite the opposite. Most of the engineers I train for casualty assistance have a great deal of empathy for grieving people because their own lives are so terrible. There are misconceptions about what this job involves. A lot of people who have been fortunate enough to never experience a casualty call firsthand have this idea of what it's like that comes from entertainment, where the notification team arrives at the residence of the family, rings the chime, the door opens, the spouse or parent or whoever it is immediately recognizes what's going on and starts to cry, and then the shot pulls back or it fades to the next scene or something, and you don't actually see what a casualty call is like. It's not as simple as just standing there in front of the next of kin and mournfully removing your hat, you know? For one thing, we don't wear hats. It would be just that much easier if we did, because taking your hat off is an indicating gesture. It cues the person you're notifying what to expect. It helps to get into the difficult and painful bit more smoothly because you can let them know what's coming without saying anything. Without the hat, the other options for indicating gestures aren't great. There is a dress uniform variant that includes a hat, but we don't use the dress uniform on casualty calls. An excessive level of formality for such a personal, emotional occasion can be alienating, can even come across as ridiculous. That's why on casualty calls we wear a standard duty uniform like this, so we don't look ridiculous. When you are out in the field making real casualty assistance calls, you will never be alone. Usually there will be two of you. A chaplain will accompany you if one is available. If not, another of your fellow casualty assistance officers will accompany you to the residence. One of you will take the lead and deliver the notification, while the other stands by to provide a supporting presence. So, to get accustomed to that dynamic, I'd like to take a few minutes and have you all get up, divide into groups of 3 or 4, and practice making a notification call. Take turns playing the roles of the next of kin and the notification team. Okay? Any questions? Yes. There is no straight man. Casualty notifications are typically performed by personnel stationed nearby to the party being notified. That way the notification can be done in a timely manner. Starfleet regulations require that next of kin be informed of a casualty as soon as that casualty is confirmed and in as short a time as possible, because the identity of a lost Starfleet member isn't released to the public until after the family has been informed. I carry out my duties here in Sector 301, which is where the Goddard colonies are located, the oldest and largest deep space human settlements, probably the largest human population outside of the Sol system. These are children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of pioneers, and a lot of them grow up to join Starfleet, which means, sadly, that I and the rest of the Casualty Assistance Office in this sector usually have a lot of work. Mr. Chatterjee, the Commander-in-Chief of Starfleet, has asked me to inform you that your wife, Chief Petty Officer First Class Phyllis Windsor of the USS Angulalic, was killed in the line of duty on the moon of Minhao 3 on stardate 1855.4. She was on a security detail accompanying a landing party exploring the surface of the moon. As the team was hiking along the rim of a volcanic crater, she lost her footing and fell, and was subsequently swallowed by an immense native creature that was living inside the crater. Captain Donaldson of the Angulalic and the Commander-in-Chief extend their deepest sympathies to you and your family for your loss. What did I do wrong on that one? Anybody? Yes. Nothing. Correct. That was perfect. When you make casualty notification calls, do them all exactly like that. Question. No, you'll change the details to fit the person you're talking to. Although in most cases, you probably won't have to change them that much. Performing a casualty notification for a member of Starfleet who has died in a relatively mundane fashion is difficult, and we do a lot of those. Even now, when it's a normal part of life, space travel is hazardous, and on a daily basis, Starfleet personnel are killed by faulty equipment, accidental radiation exposure, airlock malfunctions, the sort of things that have taken the lives of space travelers for hundreds of years. 2 days ago, I was at New Greenbelt making a notification to the husband of a crewman on the USS Roanoke. They're doing a stellar chemistry study of the Zorkian cluster. The crewman was working in the shuttle bay. One of the survey teams had just launched. The door was still open. There was a momentary power failure in that section. The safety force field failed for a fraction of a second, but that's all it took. The bay decompressed, and he was gone. Now his life is over, and I had to tell his husband that the life he thought he was going to have is over too. It happens just like that. And yet, as difficult as those kinds of calls are, they're a barefoot romp through the dewy grass compared to the ones for less mundane causes of death. Because as tragic as it is, dying in an accidental decompression or a shuttle crash is something that everyone in Starfleet, and everyone with a loved one in Starfleet, is at least prepared for in theory. You know about those risks going in, and you're trained for how to respond in those situations, and we have regulations and backups and redundancies in place specifically to respond to those situations, which is why, even though such tragedies are still sadly inevitable, the odds that any given individual will die in the line of duty are very, very low. Let's say very low. So in my training seminars, I cover the basics and walk through how to make a notification for someone who's had a conventional cause of death, but I place special emphasis on those more exotic situations. Let me give you a scenario, and this is hypothetical, but it is based on a call I made myself some years ago. An emergency medic serving aboard a starship has died. To understand the cause of death, you have to know what led up to it. A landing party beamed down to an uncharted planet for a standard preliminary survey. All prior indications were that the planet was safe. Sensors detected no threats. When the team finished its survey, all members beamed back up. The transporter detected no pathogens or parasites. Everything seemed fine. The next day, a non-corporeal being that had unknowingly attached itself to the body of one of the members of the landing party made its presence known, took control of that crew member's body, and commandeered the ship. It turns out the planet had served as a prison colony for a planet in a nearby star system. The civilization on that planet had abandoned the prison millennia ago and has since evolved into a peaceful and enlightened society. The Kosovians, maybe you've heard of them. We keep inviting them to join the Federation and they keep politely declining. Some of the inmates on that abandoned prison planet survive in a disembodied form due to an unusual electromagnetic field generated by the planetary core. This prisoner was hoping to escape and use the weaponry on the ship to attack the Kasovians, take revenge on those who had imprisoned them, or at least the descendants of those who had imprisoned them. The Kasovians are pacifists now. They dismantled their military and defensive systems long ago, so they'd be sitting ducks in such an attack. Also, the prisoner, this non-corporeal being possessing a crew member, seals off an entire section of engineering, and while they're in there, they change the display settings for all the computer consoles, which drives the chief engineer nuts when she gets back in there after all this is over. She is not a fan of the sunset desktop theme whatsoever. This is still completely hypothetical, by the way. The crew of the ship devises a method of forcing the being to release the crew member it had possessed, but the problem is they have no way of containing the being after that. The being could just possess someone else and continue its efforts to use the ship to attack the Kasovians and change the preferred settings on God knows how many other systems. That's where our emergency medic comes in. She knows potentially millions of lives on the Kasovian homeworld are at stake if this escaped inmate isn't stopped. She sees what needs to be done. She gets her hands on a hypo syringe containing the chemical concoction the science and medical teams came up with that will force the non-corporeal being to release the possessed crew member. She manages to sneak into the section of engineering where the being has barricaded themselves, deliver the necessary dose of the stuff from the hypo. The being releases the possessed crew member, and since the emergency medic is the only other person around, the being immediately possesses her. Now, she has to act fast. She knows there's a time delay between when the being enters your body and when it's able to take control of your body, but she doesn't know how long. So she runs to the shuttle bay, steals a shuttlecraft, flies it out a safe distance from the ship, and triggers an overload of the fusion reactor. The ship is free, the Kasovians are safe, but that shuttlecraft, the non-corporeal escaped prisoner, and our heroic emergency medic have all gone up in, essentially, a miniature supernova. Now it's your job to make the notification to her family. What do you say? Ensign Walton. We always knew she'd be a star someday. No. Someone else. Chief Torsdahl. Her poor safety record for reactor maintenance turned out to be a good thing. Not factual based on what I told you, not appropriate, and not that good of a joke. Anyone else? Ensign Ishtasapa. After putting in the work for all those years, she finally blew up. That's basically the same as what Walton said. You do understand the purpose here, right? It's a challenge. And I get it. I don't blame some of the new people for not taking it seriously. Humor is a very effective defense mechanism. It allows you to distance yourself from the pain and the horror, and we all need that if we're going to continue doing our jobs. Plus, to be honest, a lot of what we're dealing with is absurd. And not just in the sense of being humorous, actually absurd. As in, it defies all logic. One of the first notifications I had to do when I came to this office was for a science officer on a ship, the USS Glushko, if I remember correctly. He was part of an away team exploring a centuries-old derelict ship they'd discovered, and when the team beamed back to their ship, he was gone. At first, it was assumed he'd somehow been lost due to a transporter malfunction, but they couldn't figure out what had happened. Then they detected human remains on the planet the derelict was orbiting, where human remains had no business being. They lock on with the transporter and beam the remains up, and they turn out to be the remains of this lost science officer. Only they're hundreds of years old. It turns out this derelict ship, back when it wasn't a derelict, had been the site of some kind of temporal displacement experiment. The equipment used for the experiment was still active, and because the science officer was standing a little too close to the wrong thing when the transporter beam energized to bring everyone home, instead of beaming back to his ship, he was beamed down to that planet and into the past, where, apparently, with no way of contacting his ship or anyone else's, he lived out the rest of his life, alone, and seemingly died of natural causes after surviving into his mid-80s. So I had to pay a visit to his mother and tell her that her 29-year-old son was dead, and that he died of old age, and that he had been dead for approximately 400 years, even though she'd just seen him at Easter dinner a few months before. Absurd, but not funny. Imagine having to tell someone that. And imagine being the person who gets that news. What are you supposed to do with that information? If I tell you your son was killed when his ship exploded, there's a part of you that's been dreading that ever since he signed up and left home. You can accept that. But if I tell you your son was killed because he was accidentally beamed back in time and he lived like a caveman for 60 years before his heart finally gave out, but don't worry, we found what's left of his bones in a cave and we're bringing him home. What? Which parenting book has that chapter? How do you tell a woman your wife is dead because a godlike being on what we thought was an uninhabited planet turned her into a houseplant and then yanked her out of her pot and tore her apart to prove a point to the captain of her ship? That one didn't actually happen to me. The officer who trained me when I first transferred here told us it was one of her cases. I never asked her what her opener was for that one. I'd still love to know. Yes, Ensign Conrad. Killed in self-defense by a crewmate after an alien spore caused them to mutate into a monster. Yes, I've had to do a notification for one of those. I find it very unlikely any of you will be able to come up with one that I haven't at least heard of. Potente, you've got one? Killed while time traveling. I did a notification for one of those a little over a year ago. Mrs. So-and-so, the Commander-in-Chief of Starfleet, has asked me to inform you that your son, Lieutenant So-and-so, was killed in the line of duty yesterday, and 300 years ago. Trembly. Decapitated after turning into a space zombie. I know people who have had to do notifications for those, but I've never done one myself. I have had to do staked after turning into a space vampire, though. Oh yeah. I've done a bunch of those. I just did one like 2 weeks ago. Seriously, everybody, if you think somebody might be a space vampire, do not let them hug you. Odubasan. Depressurized spacesuit. You got me. Never. Seriously. The seals on EV suits are rigorously tested and extremely safe. The worst ones are war casualties. God, I hate doing those. When someone dies by an accident, that's tragic, but it's space travel. It's dangerous. Things happen. When someone dies as the result of some bizarre circumstance that no one could possibly have anticipated. Like I said, it's absurd, but apparently we live in an absurd universe. Killed in combat? That's not accidental. That's not absurd. That's cruel. That's a kind of betrayal, I think. A couple of years ago, when we were at war with the Malvosians, a lot of the kids who got sent to the front lines were from the Goddard colonies. Young officers just graduated from the academy, enlistees fresh out of recruit training, some of them only 18 years old. So, most of the notifications were to parents. I had to tell these moms and dads that their baby wasn't coming home. Their baby who signed up for Starfleet to explore the galaxy, to expand knowledge, to support peaceful coexistence between species. Now they're dead because Starfleet sent them to war. I had to make, I don't even know how many casualty assistance calls as a result of that war, and every single person I talked to, in their eyes was a look that said, "How could you do this to them? Get out there among the stars, kid. See the universe up close, learn, help people, make a difference." That's what we tell them. Then, whenever the need arises, we put a gun in their hands and shove them into the line of fire. You're a soldier now, kid. Go defend the Federation. I love Starfleet. I believe in it. I'm proud of my service in it. But when people repeat that company line about how, oh, it's not a military, it's a scientific and diplomatic and humanitarian service, my answer is always, yeah, who fights the wars? Because it ain't the Space Force. Thank God we'd all be speaking Malvosian, which wouldn't be a big deal practically speaking. It's exactly like English, but it's the principle. Another scenario, and pay attention because there's a quiz. An officer is returning to duty aboard their starship after attending a supplemental training course for 2 weeks. It wasn't this one. On the way to their rendezvous point, they pass through a spatial anomaly that turns out to be a quantum bifurcation field. And what emerges from the other side of that field are 2 identical shuttlecraft piloted by 2 identical officers. Key piece of information here. This is not a case where there is an original and a duplicate. Because of how the effect of the quantum bifurcation field works, both officers who emerge from the field have an equal claim to being the real version. They both return to their ship, and shortly thereafter, as the rest of the crew is just beginning to figure out what to do about this situation, the ship is attacked by a squad of Malvosian fighters, and one of the 2 identical officers is killed. The other version is still alive, and is just as much the real version as their dead counterpart, which means that practically speaking, the effect of the bifurcation field has been reversed. There were 2 versions of the same person. Now there is once again only one version of that person. Here's the quiz. 1 question. Do we have to make a casualty assistance call? How many people say yes? Raise them up. How many people say no? You're wrong. It doesn't matter if they were killed with the rest of their crewmates when their ship exploded. It doesn't matter if a vengeful demigod vaporized them with a wave of its hand to demonstrate its power. It doesn't matter if a mystical and mysterious rite practiced by the native inhabitants of an unexplored planet transformed them into a squirrel and they were subsequently killed, cooked into a stew, and eaten. That one actually happened to someone on the ship where I was assigned for field study my last year at the academy. And again to someone else on the ship I was on right before I transferred here. Wear that uniform long enough and it'll happen to someone you know. Or to you. Starfleet regulations state that we make a casualty assistance call to inform the next of kin anytime a member of Starfleet is lost in the line of duty. When the officer in my example passed through that quantum bifurcation field, that one officer became 2 officers. They had been one person up until that moment. They both attended the academy. They both had the exact same career. They both had the exact same life. The fact that one of them survived to continue that career and that life is irrelevant to our duty. A Starfleet officer was lost. Someone died wearing the uniform. That sacrifice must be noted and honored, and that person's family must be informed of that sacrifice. That is our duty. Definitely a smart idea to open with the good news in that case. It's a tough job. It's a necessary job. It's, in many ways, a disillusioning job. But it's also a job that makes it very easy to put things in perspective. Serving in Starfleet is dangerous, but getting out of bed in the morning can be dangerous, whether your bed is on a starship or on the planet where you were born. You never know what's going to happen. You know your time is going to come, but you don't know when or how. Hopefully it will come peacefully, painlessly at the end of a long and satisfying life, but ultimately that's not up to you. Being aware of that makes every night when you get back into bed something to be grateful for. Were you blown into space by an explosive decompression? Were you bitten in half by a Tyrannosaurus Rex because your landing party beamed down to a duplicate Earth where dinosaurs never went extinct? Did a band of Kroldarnian marauders rip out your organs and feed them to their children? No? Then it was a good day.